Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so welcome everyone. I think it's a Saturday evening, so that goes to show your commitment, if you're making it to the session, first of all, the eagerness that you have in terms of understanding a little bit about, decisions and basically taking decisions using data, right? So don't I mean, the first thing that I would like to talk about, is that just because everybody is after data science, everybody is after decision science, don't just rush after it. While sir was asking these questions to a couple of participants, that whether you have exposure to data or not, I think one person did not give an answer that, uh, or rather, she said that she is not. But then, don't think of this data ecosystem only as somebody who is working in the analytics space, right? That is the first thing. Because daily you are generating a lot of data on a day-to-day basis, you are consuming a lot of data. The insights of the data, whether you like it or not, whether you appreciate that or not, you're already a part of this ecosystem, right? So the more you get connected to the data as a consumer also, I mean, that will drive you or take you to that level where you will start or getting intrigued by, what analytics is all about, especially for starters. I think this session I will talk about a lot of concepts which are basically applied in the industry and in terms of some practical projects, etc., and how this entire field is shaping up, based on my experience. But we'll try to keep it extremely simple because that is where, everything lies. If you can't simplify it, then there's no point, otherwise it becomes complex math at the end of the day. Having said that, I will just jump into the first question, and I would like you guys to, take this quick quiz because most of us on a day to day, take a lot of decisions, be it any part of our lives. It is all about taking decisions, where be it selecting a college for an MBA, or be it opting for a, or going and buying something from the market, some value purchases that you do. Everything will be backed by certain choices. It will then eventually you will take a decision, and if you take a decision, I would quickly like to understand, what is basically the most overwhelming one that you feel, you know, that hinders your decision making power. And you can call it out. I know the participation is, I mean, limited, so this is not a huge crowd, so I won't go and look at the output. But you can just tell me, one of you can volunteer or maybe tell me, and I will take a cue from that and start the session. What is the most challenging thing that you face while you're taking a decision?
Maybe too much of data.
Okay. Correct. So, if you could just give me an example, what were you thinking? What are you trying to decide on? And then what is that data which is overwhelming you?
I'll take an example from academics domain. Say, for example, I talk about a Nagpur city.
Okay.
So how many MBA colleges are there? How many students are enrolled? How many are specializing in which particular specialization, finance, marketing, HR operations? And then aligning it to how many opportunities, placement, job opportunities are there in the local market. How many will have to, in past, how many moved out of Nagpur for placements in that sense?
Perfect. So, what is the ultimate decision that you are going to take with this when you analyze all of this data? The placement opportunities, if I
The
got it right.
placement opportunities, the enrollments in the colleges at Nagpur and at a particular place or a city.
Yeah.
Maybe the gender question could also get answered through this. How many are more females inclined towards MBA degree, or the students or males are inclined towards that?
Okay. And if I may just extend that question, sir, do you do a formal research on this, or how is it? Is there a structured approach that you follow, or is it, how do you do it?
Not exactly done till now. This was
Hmm.
just a prompt thought immediately
Okay.
which came to my mind. But then
Uh,
definitely it gives me, your question itself gives me a thought key. Yes, why not to go into and do a research for this?
Correct. Correct. Precisely. I mean, this was a question asked deliberately to set that context, because all of us, irrespective of the walks of life that we come from, are associated with decision making, right? And at the end of the day, when you say that there's a lot of options available, and that in a simplistic way, I have put it like pressures from others or too many opinions, or there are too many options that overwhelms us. Now, the best way is to basically put some, structure to that decision making process where we are trying to analyze and then come to a decision, because that will give us the confidence to act on that decision. Having said that, now as business leaders, every organization today is faced by certain challenges. There are kind of four which I have put here, but then there are too many others as well. One is the navigating the uncertainty and risk. Today the market, the business, even for job aspirants as well. Let's not talk about business right now. The business leaders definitely have a lot of challenges here. There is a lot of debate in the market going on for service companies. If I talk about, there is something, if you have heard about productized solutions, whether to go for products, whether to go for solutions, how to build accelerators. There are so many choices which people are grappling with. They just simply can't keep up pace with the fast growing dynamics of this space, and there are so many reports which McKinsey, Gartner, everybody is coming out from a day-to-day basis that how service companies especially are going to evolve. And why I take the service companies example is because they are a huge employment generator in the country, right? So I mean, if they are getting impacted with the advent of AI and these solution based approaches, then definitely it's going to take a hit, right? So that is the uncertainty that prevails in the market, and there are financial pressures also, cost pressures and things like those. So those are, from a business leadership standpoint, that's a day to day kind of a problem. But if you talk about individuals also, and for the number of participants that we have here who are basically trying to take a leap and trying to identify where they should kind of what kind of roles they should take up, or what kind of programs they should do. For example, they just know that, look, data analytics is a booming space, but now if I ask you that how many roles this entire data analytics space has to offer, there are countless. It's not just uh, about, if I talk about one of the examples that I had with, like 2 years back, I was discussing it with some graduate out of college. All they knew was that if you want to get into data analytics, learn Python and then you are in. If I'm not a good coder, I cannot get into it. I mean, those are myths, right? And even the background that I come from, I'm not a hardcore kind of a coder. I started off as a statistical modeler, where it was more into statistical modeling, doing models on Excel. 14 years back, I'm talking about, right? So those were the starts that we got. Today, if at that point in time, if somebody gave me a choice of a BSc statistics versus a Bachelor of Engineering, I would always prefer Bachelor of Engineering, because that looked like a shortcut to a campus. But then, I had colleagues whom I have worked with. They are like Bachelor of Science in Statistics, Master of Science in Statistics, and they are sitting at pole positions, in the industry right now with these 14, 15 years. So what I'm trying to say is the options are huge. It is all about, understanding that what is going to lead us to those positions, and what if we apply a structured approach to this decision making. That is the overall theme of this entire presentation, that everything exists around us, but then you have to apply a certain structure, and we'll see in the course of the presentation that how do we do it. And here I've deliberately kept it like unpacking decision science, because see, when you go out in the industry, the term data science, machine learning, artificial intelligence, everything is thrown loosely around, but there are certain nuanced differences to it. Uh, but I would like to understand from you, any of the participants, you can tell me that what do you understand when I say decision science, and why the term decision science and why not data science? See, I'll try to keep it interactive, because otherwise, I think it will become just a one-way traffic. So I don't want to do that. I just want to keep exchanging ideas and thoughts. So, any thoughts? Because data science is something you will just hear a lot about. But now, what is this decision science thing?
Shubham, can you please come in and answer these questions? This is a question I think you can answer definitely.
Yes, sir. Actually, ultimate goal is to make meaningful insights. So it is called decision science.
Okay, good. So partly correct, but what will you do with those insights, Shubham? Or what
Any
will a
business
business do
outcomes,
with that insight?
any business outcomes,
Yeah.
or something related to sales.
Business outcome that you say, that's an outcome, right? So ultimately, we are trying to take a decision, right? So you
Right.
analyze a lot of data. Now, sir gave an example that look, he wants to analyze all this, cohort in the and probably do a segmentation and understand who are the people interested in MBAs and all of that. But ultimately, this will aid him design courses which are targeted. One example is the course that the Symbiosis is doing right now, the SCDL is doing, right? So, I mean, there would have been a lot of research that has gone in, right? Ultimate thing is to get to that decision, because if your insight is not getting you to the decision, in business terms, we call it a failure. Because if I'm doing an analysis, and I can give you an example, I was doing Kraft Foods. If all of you know, it's one of the global conglomerates, right? So right now they own the Cadbury brand as well. The Mondelez of International is something that owns. Erstwhile, it was Kraft Foods. There was no Mondelez separate. Now we did a 9-month study for them, in terms of their pricing insights. We submitted a deck of 50 slides at the end of 9 months. It had got a lot of information, but when it came to decision making, there was no decision which was taken. And that was unfortunate for multiple reasons. And it was in the Indian market that we did. We tried to replicate something that we had already done in the US market, and it failed miserably. So, what all I'm trying to say is, irrespective of all the analysis that you do, all the insights that you generate, that might be an insight for you, but that might just be an observation for the other person, coming from a domain knowledge. But if it is not moving the needle in terms of getting to a decision, it's worthless, right? So now the essential point which I'm trying to make through this is, as you said, right, decision science is something, which will cut across not just the quantitative aspect of it, which is data science, but there are always a lot of behavioral elements which are associated with it, right? And that is where the clients specifically that I'm working with right now, I can see a lot of traction towards decision science. They are not looking at data science roles. They are looking for people who can really cut the ice, analyze the quantitative data, and then combine it with some behavioral science. Behavioral science, when I say, if you try and understand the consumer behavior as well, right? And there will be a lot of things, and I will talk through those examples. These are quite a few examples which I've put in the slide. I will anyway share it, so I don't want to discuss the slide here. But just keep in mind that when I talk about decision science, it is more about, not just the quantitative aspect of data science, the statistical models, etc., but it is marrying that with your behavioral economics as well. What is it that prompting you to get to that decision? What are your, the social variables around an individual who is taking that decision, right? So both being studied together and helping us to get to that insight, which will in turn drive that decision. That is the ultimate goal of any business, and that is why decision science is getting a lot of traction. Having said that, right, so there are certain decisional models. I'll quickly kind of give you a little bit of a brief into all these four. How many of you have already heard of it? Because this is pretty common, if you have read a little bit about data analytics, so you will understand that there are, when you talk about decision models, you can break it down into four areas. Very simplistically calling descriptive analytics, which is simply looking at even if you're looking at a lot of data, which you have researched through, say, observational studies, etc., and you've just created some pivots out of an Excel. It is just telling you what has happened in the past. That's descriptive. That is describing the data in its form, right? Then you try to predict something, that what will happen in the future. That is all predictive analytics all about. But if you on that analytics, if you try to prescribe somebody, what action needs to be taken, what recommendations are, if there are certain recommendations that you want to give based on those models, that becomes prescriptive. And then if you want to go to a root cause of a problem, say for example, you have lost a lot of sales, right? As a retailer, you have lost some sales in the last 6 months. Now, if you want to get to the root cause of the problem, then that becomes diagnostic analytics, right? So these are typically the quantitative models, the decision models that we call for. And this forms the foundation for everything that we do in analytics, right? Everything that you will do, 60-70% of the problem statement will revolve around this only, right? And there will be nuanced versions of it, but then broad classification will always remain the same. Okay. Now coming to the decision-making process, right? So this is a pretty straightforward process where you start with a problem definition, you gather a lot of data, you analyze it, you get some alternatives, you make a decision, implement it, and then you start reviewing it, right? So this is a standard process, but what I want to focus here is, can you tell me, right, which is the most critical part of this process? Just take a guess.
Hello. Yeah,
Yes.
I would say gathering the data, maybe because the kind of data you have, the results will be like that data only.
Okay, that will be basically dependent on the kind of data you collect, right? Because what you are saying is essentially the quality of the data will define the outcome, the
Yeah.
quality of the outcome. Okay, any other thoughts?
That would be the defining the data, I think. Because the problem is that you have to define the data and what is the problem and what kind of a solution, what we needed. So I think that could be the major role play for getting the process.
Defining the problem, you mean, or defining the data? Because data definition will be different. Defining
I
the
think,
problem will be
sorry,
different.
it could be the defining the problem.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that is something I was looking at, because the all these stages, the biggest challenge is defining the right problem. I mean, there is an adage you would have always heard, most of the times what we are doing is we are solving for the wrong problem, and that is why we are not getting to an outcome. So the focus should always be, defining the problem, and I'll show you how uh, in the subsequent slides and the examples. But any example that comes to your mind where you can think that, the problem, when I say defining the problem right is important, what do I mean by that? Or any examples where you have failed just because you understood at a later stage, and somebody spoke about gathering the data, you have gathered a lot of data, and then you analyzed, and then you realize that what was I solving for? Did that happen with anybody? And we'll find the answer later in the session, but yeah, just wanted to trigger that thought. But anyway, if nobody's answering, keep that thought in your mind, and I'll give you an example that why defining the problem is critically important for us, right? So tools and techniques, again, I told you there are essentially two. One is the quantitative approach, which you take essentially. And then the other one is the qualitative approach, right? In the quantitative approach, it is always about numbers. It is always doing a lot of number crunching. One example could be like if you are solving a prediction problem, you are doing a regression analysis, you are trying to identify, what are the different variables which are impacting, say, for example, your sales. Taking a very simple example, easy to understand, if there is a retail store like a Walmart, if it is selling a certain products, and then you are trying to understand, what are the variables which are driving the sales, that becomes a typical quantitative problem when you solve it through a regression technique. Qualitative, on the contrary, is another example where you try to understand the consumer behavior in the same region using some kind of a panel data, where you try to understand what are the brand perception that a customer has, that also impacts, but you're not directly calling it out in the quantitative model. And that is why, you want these two to be combined together. Does that make sense? I just want to nod because if you're following it, the quantitative aspect and the qualitative aspect.
Yeah, got it.
Yes, sir.
Great. So how many of you have heard about Nielsen? It's a big market research company. What they do is when they do these kind of analytics, trying to understand the customer behavior, and they work for world's global retailers and everybody. So I had the opportunity to work with them, right? One of the typical studies they would do is, you know, try to understand, the price elasticity of the products. When I say the price elasticity, it is more about, how do you price your products in the market to be able to drive that consumption across. Say for example, you are selling milk, right? It is kind of a product which is a daily use product, so the sensitivity for the user will be different when I talk about the price of a milk versus the price of another product, right? So that you can always answer through a quantitative technique. But what they did is they used to install these panels in those regions, to a certain sample. Well, they'll try to understand, overall, what is the perception of a particular brand. That is one example. What is their affinity towards that brand? These are the softer elements they'll try to analyze, and then combine these two analysis and then present it to the category managers and tell them and give an insight, not just on the quantitative, the demand and kind of price, kind of a correlation, but also bringing into effect that look how the customers are perceiving your brand, so that you can take a decision based on that as well. So that is why integrating both of them becomes very important.
Sorry, which company you mentioned?
Nielsen.
Achha, Nielsen. Right.
Nielsen. Yeah. And there are multiple examples around that, but Nielsen is one example. Even right now, I work with a lot closely with Adidas. So even they have, and I'll talk you through that example also. You'll get to know better. See, the essence of this entire thing is, we talk a lot about data science. We talk a lot about models, but somewhere we are missing the behavioral element of the consumer, where we are trying to understand the behavioral aspects and integrating those into the model, right? So that's what basically moves the needle. That is the overall the key message that I want to drive through this. Now you see the quantitative techniques moving on, right? So here, these are just examples, you can learn about these, and there are multiple others as well, but these are primarily something which is essentially used, right? When you talk about quantitative techniques, linear programming is something anybody from a maths background, even I think from a non-maths background also will understand. The classic example is where you use an Excel solver, you try to basically do some goal seek, try to fix something, you try to optimize, say the shortest path, or try to basically, when say for example there is a supply chain company, it is trying to figure out that what is the shortest path to reach my production hub, right? Or so that way you apply a lot of linear programming even in your day-to-day life, right? So if you have a certain salary that gets credited, and then you have certain variables in terms of the expenditures, and you try to maximize your saving. These are simple techniques that you always apply. A lot of people will definitely apply that. So it is basically having some objective function, and then there are certain variables against which you try to, optimize it to the best possible way in terms of maximizing the profitability. Say, for example, in terms of the salary example that I gave, it will be trying to maximize your savings. How can you play with those decision variables, right? So that is one example from linear programming. Then you have Bayesian model. I think this is a concept which is predominantly, used, and where it is used, I will tell you. A lot of references you would have heard, right? There is historical analysis that we do. Historical data, we analyze a lot of historical data. But what this Bayesian does is this Bayesian approach does is, so essentially, I don't want to get into the statistical details of it. So broadly, there are two approaches that we follow in statistics, right? So one is the frequentist approach and one is the Bayesian approach. The frequentist approach is something which I alluded to, a little bit, that you have a lot of historical data and then based on that, you start your modeling. In Bayesian, what you do is you have an understanding of the past behavior and then you feed that into the model, that look, this is the traditional behavior that the data exactly shows. And then based on that, you go about modeling it. You take a lot of reference or a lot of leaf out of the historical books, whereas in your traditional modeling approach, you are just using it, the data as is, and whatever it tells you. It is not about feeding it or updating it. Here, what you do is based on the past, you continuously update that prior belief that you have about an event or a particular type of data. You consistently update those, and then you leave it to for the model to decide. This basically gives you a lot of I mean push in terms of accuracy. It requires low samples. There are a lot of benefits out of it, and companies have consistently used it. And the example that I'm going to discuss, you will see that how we have applied it. So that's another approach. Then decision trees, a very simple example, very easy to understand. And in all these decision tree tutorials I've seen, very common example. It's a rainy weather and whether I should go out to play or not, on what variables it is dependent. It's a simple tree structure. On a yes no basis, you basically calculate it. I mean, there is a lot of statistical concept and rigor which goes in behind in terms of information gain, etc. But I will not go into the details of that. But largely understand that these are mathematical techniques. These are mathematical functions and models where you're trying to maximize something based on certain variables. In terms of linear programming, you're trying to update your prior beliefs in terms of your Bayesian model. And then there are multiple options that are available to you, and you're trying to come to the best option using a decision tree. Right? So broadly, that is it. Now, the catch here is only that will that help you for a decision making? The answer will always be no. It will not give you what you actually want unless you bring all of these together in. See, these are the human elements of decision making, right? A cognitive bias. And this is where I would require a little bit of a participation from you, right? So when I say a cognitive bias, just think of a scenario where I'm telling you that, look, what is your expected salary? That is a very common question people have, right, in the interviews. What do you think will be your answer? How will you give that answer? And give me a little bit of a quantitative answer, because it can be like whatever fits the industry and not about that, because that doesn't lead us to anywhere. And I'll tell you why I'm asking you this question. Anybody? Because that's a predominant question being asked in all interviews.
Monthly or annual package?
Anything, annual package you can go, because generally we talk about annual CTC, right? So
annual CTC, let's say 50 lakhs.
Yeah, if you say 50 lakhs, right? Now, what you have done is you have anchored it to a certain number, correct? Now, whatever I offer you will revolve around that. Now, what if the company was already trying to offer, say, a 70 lakhs for that particular role? So generally what happens is, this is a bias. What I'm trying to explain it to you here is that every individual has a cognitive bias, right? So this is one example. You call it an anchoring effect. So what happens is when you say 50 lakhs, the interviewer already has kind of recalibrated that in his mind that, look, this guy is already at 50. Even if I was looking at 75, I will give him something around about that range. Right? It can go either way also. You can go ahead and ask for a 1 CR as well. That doesn't. But then the anchoring part is that all of these beliefs, this systematic thinking, it is imbibed in our human brains. When we look at a certain role, we have a notion that, look, this could be the salary. If I'm going to a bank company, it can be 70 lakhs. But if I'm going to a normal service company, it can be 50 lakhs for that particular role, right? So this is a bias which will always drive your decision making. Correct? Irrespective of how much data you have analyzed through Glassdoor or any platform for that matter, but this bias will always play in your mind.
Correct.
Right. So this is important. So that is why I'm trying to deduce that what is the importance of this qualitative technique, right? Because you might have analyzed a lot of salary data, but then when you are trying to use this, because that anchor played in your mind, right? For this role, this is the number. Now, here it was not the approach. So this needs to be taken care when you are trying to arrive at a decision, not just the quantitative research that you have done. Similarly, when you look at a prospect theory also, this is another example. Now, what happens is if I tell you tomorrow you are going to gain 100 rupees versus losing 100 rupees, anybody and everybody will try to avoid that loss because we are risk averse people. We fear that loss of 100 rupees more than gaining that 100 rupees. And how this plays out is, the way the marketing campaigns run, you'll always see that people will try to get you in a position where they are trying to pitch. Say, for example, somebody is coming and telling you that you should go in and buy this insurance, they'll always come and tell you that what if, you lose your job in the next 6 months or 6 years or 5 years or whatever, you know, that's how they will try and sell, because you are not willing to take that risk. You are always fearful of the loss, which is inside, right? So that is one very key thing that affects your decision making. So all of this we need to keep in mind while we are doing these data analytics and everything, because this side we don't explore much, but it has to be combined, baked in into your analysis to be able to give you that kind of a insight which will drive decisions at the end of the day. Right. The last one is around nudge theory. There are complete books around these theories, but this is the three which I find the most meaningful, so I've kept it. Nudge theory is something where you basically, try to nudge people into certain decision making. Say, for example, you go to a canteen and you know that people generally will eat junk there, but if you just put a message board, that eating healthy could save you this or help you lose this, you're trying to, with that message, you're trying to nudge people to healthier eating habits, right? Similarly, and whatever examples I'm giving, just apply it to the industry, whatever functions you come from, be it HR, be it finance, be it marketing, you'll always find a relevance to it. If you're coming from a, say a marketing background, you always want to nudge your customer into some kind of a buying decision, right? So that will always come. So these three are just examples, and there could be more. The overall essence, I repeat, is basically not just to rely on that quantitative analysis that you have done, but also these qualitative measures, right? Now we'll just quickly jump to an example and see how it goes, right? In the data science parlance, right? So this is one example, a very, very common example that you will find in the data analytics world. And every company, to an extent, if you talk about e-commerce companies, they are every e-commerce company. You talk about a Walmart, you talk about a Flipkart, if you talk about an Amazon, you talk about Adidas, you talk about Puma, everybody will be doing it, because whosoever has got a digital shelf, whosoever has got an e-commerce presence, they will always do A/B testing. Anybody knows what A/B testing is? Just quickly,
In the
Yes.
alpha and beta testing,
Sorry.
that could be the alpha and beta testing, integration analysis, like for stacks.
Not really. So, in simplistic words, I'll tell you what it is. It is basically testing two versions of the same thing, right? If you have a web page, you just try and see how the customers are going to respond, say, to a particular feature that you have introduced, right? So what you have is one version where you don't have the feature, the other version where you have the feature incorporated. Now you try to understand if the customers are basically responding to that. That is where you decide that whether this feature it could be deployed on my website or not. So that's how companies basically decide. So whatever you see on the web pages, those little features, those little discount buttons and everything, the product details, everything around it, there's a lot of, analytics that goes behind it. So I'll give you an example and you will see how it goes. So see, this is an example, right? So you see this shoe. All of us go to a page and you see this shoe here. So one is a static image on a website. The other one is a 360 degree where the user gets the freedom to basically rotate it and see it from all sides. So what the company will do is it will have one version, which is the static image. It will send it out. It will just send it out to a certain cohort of customers. And again, it will have that version where it has got a 360-degree view. And then it will send that also out to the customer. And then you see how the customers are responding, right? So you would split the traffic for a certain period of time. You analyze these KPIs. So you see the primary KPI is basically the conversion rate. What you are trying to see is if a person goes and first he searches for that product, he goes to that product detail page, he reads through that, and then he makes a decision to basically purchase. So that is where the conversion happens. So what you are trying to say is, if I give a static image versus if I give a 360-degree image, what is going to work for me? And if you get certain statistically robust results, then we go ahead and tell the customers that, look, this is a good viable option where you can just go ahead and deploy it in your web page. Right. So this is a pretty simple example. So everything that you see, it is just one example, but every little detail, whenever next time you look to a Flipkart, look at a Flipkart page, just think of it. What science goes behind all of those changes that you see quickly coming through? Even if there is a discount that has been announced, where it is going to be placed, on which page it is going to be placed, whether it is going to be placed on the landing page or whether it is going to be placed on the checkout page. There could be multiple options.
Abhijit
Yeah.
ji,
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
as students, I would request you to please switch on your cameras and even mic in case you have any questions. Feel free. There is one very interesting thing which it came to my mind. I'm not a person from data analytics background. I'm more of an administrator. But here, what question prompts me to ask you here is that
Yeah.
when you say primary KPI is conversion rate and secondary is add to cart, time on page, and bounce rate. So, as a decision making analyst or maybe a data analyst, how do I get the feeds for this? That is my question. So probably I'll request you to go a bit deep into that so that we understand how this is.
Yeah.
So I've understood that there is a question there has to be answered. What traditionally we do in education is that we prepare a Google form questions. Everyone is asked to do a multiple choice question answering, and
Yeah.
so how does a data analyst capture these questions, answers to
Yeah.
the questions?
Correct. So there are multiple ways, So essentially today, if you go, there are certain platforms. What we essentially use is there is something like Adobe Analytics, if you would have heard about it, right? So that Adobe Analytics, what they do is this platform basically captures all the user interactions. There are certain, what should I say? Uh, for the simplicity, I'm saying, right? So you integrate that into your web page. Say, for example, there is a cookie which is basically tracking a user session, right? Now it is tracking every user, that how the user journey is, right? So right from searching for that particular product to basically reading about that product and then finally adding it to cart, and maybe then there could be dropouts as well, and then there could be few conversions as well. So this entire user journey is tracked, say for example, in a tool like an Adobe Analytics, and this data is captured. And then what we do is we build those cohorts, because what can happen is a certain when I look at this, say for example, there is a sports person versus somebody who is just a casual buyer, right? For him, this 360-degree view might not be that helpful. He might not get interested. For me, it's just an Adidas shoe. It can work for me. I can be that kind of a buyer. So that may work for me. But if I'm a sports person, I need to look at the details. I need to look at the curves better and just making this as I'm saying, right? So then I'm a different kind of a user. So all this segmentation happens at the back end. We capture the user journey and then that is captured in those analytics tools. And then that data is being pulled for the analysis. And then that is where we have this primary KPI. We keep it as what we are primarily looking for is whether this change was able to move my conversion rate. The secondaries are good to have, but my primary goal is to basically convert everything into a sale.
Got it.
Okay. Yeah. So you see, this is how we get the results, right? So for example, you see here very simplistically, right? So you had two cohorts where you just did that. So you see conversion rate, what kind of lift did we get? Add to cart, what was the kind of jump that we get? And the most important part is the significance level. And this is something related to statistics. For every test, there is a certain significance level which is set that what is my chance of, accepting that particular hypothesis that I had. The hypothesis initially was that, look, whatever image that I have kept, we always start with a null hypothesis. In this data science parlance, we always start with a null hypothesis saying that there will be no effect. But what is that chance of having that effect? There are multiple techniques, I mean, that I will spare for some other session to get into the details of it. But just understand that statistical significance is something which will tell me how confident I am, how confident I am with that result, that the change that I see, that 3.9% jump in the variant B, I can 99% confidently say that, look, this has an impact, and I will accept and go ahead and implement it in my final website, right? So this is how things are being read, right? So here, when you design these, right? So the question could be that how does the qualitative aspect come in, right? So whatever I said here, this is pure play quantitative analysis, and this is all statistical analysis that goes behind. But when you are designing those creatives, whenever you are designing those changes, whenever you are analyzing those cohorts, a lot of things will come from that behavioral segmentation that we do. right? So that's a marriage of both. And that is how we are able to tell companies like, all these Pumas of the world and Adidas of the world that, look, this change, if you make it into the website, I think this can drive your conversion rate. Right. Okay. Any questions? I'll just go take a quick pause if there is anything.
So when you have an example set that these type of changes can bring in more plus 21.9% uplift to the product. So this is done for a specific client usually, or once it is done for client A, then as a consulting agency that can be delivered to other organizations also.
Yeah, that can be delivered to other organizations as well, but there are certain, the service level agreements that we have. Say, for example, what we are doing today, because here you see it is a very high level A/B test which I have shown you. It is very generic. But what we do for a client A can be very, very, proprietary in nature, right? Because all the, mathematical and statistical rigor that goes in, I mean, the approaches that we develop, I think there could be a lot of nuanced approach to it which becomes proprietary. But yeah, as a service company, we generally have those generic models also, which could be deployed across multiple clients. But generally, with these kind of things, so where this 1% or a 2% moves a lot of million of dollars, right? So I think if that is the case, then generally companies prefer proprietary models because they don't want to generally go out into the market and show what is the the secret recipe or the secret sauce of getting these conversions through. Does that answer?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Okay. A lot of this now, I think I am in the last part, but here I want to spend a little bit. I know we have like 15 minutes, I think, but with all this, mathematical rigor, the understanding of the consumer behavior, the behavioral economic side of things, I think this session could not have been like done. I mean, I could not have done justice to this session if I don't talk about a little bit of generative AI, because a lot of this has been disrupted. Not the one example that you gave, that I gave you. I mean, it is far beyond Gen AI's, reach right now. I can tell you that very honestly and with confidence that, that is not going anywhere. And that is what I wanted to talk about because everybody today is fearing or thinking, we are like talking about AGIs of the world and this, that. But believe me, I think there is a long way to go. And whether it will be 5 years or 10 years, I can safely say that, at least for the next 5 years, AGI is not there. I mean, there are multiple opinions about it, but I think AGI is far, far from us because still, whatever companies and clients that we are working with, I think people are still struggling a lot with their data ecosystem itself, to get to that level where they can call that they have the right data to be analyzed. I think that itself is in a challenge. But keeping that aside, we have to understand as human beings, where Gen AI excels and where it falls short. So there was this MIT Solve study which was done in 2024, right? So they came that the last line is pretty important, right? The best outcomes came when humans critically engage with the AI device. Now, this A/B testing example which I gave you, right? So there is a lot of historical tests which has been done. There is a lot of automation also which we are trying to implement. There are a lot of decisions, the statistical performance which I was telling you. At what confidence level should I call this test a success or a failure? We can tune the agent with that, or if not, let's not call it an agent. I can tune the model basically to take a decision there, but I need to put that human because there will be some subjectivity to the decision, right? There could be certain markets which could be kind of evolving in a certain way. Say, for example, the market dynamics will also change. There will be certain socioeconomic conditions will change, people behavior will change, but who will basically tell the models about it, right? That's the first and foremost question. Taking a cue from that example itself. So, I mean, if you are doing absolute objective analysis, you are just trying to, query about ideas, etc., and trying to see what is the art of the possible. I think Gen AI can help you or probably help you in a way that it will give you certain options that look, you can try this, try A, try B, try C. But then if it is all about, context, why you are doing this, if it is about, understanding the biases, the underlying biases in the data, So, for example, sir, if you go out into the Nagpur area, and you take a lot of students' surveys, right? And then if that survey itself is biased towards, say, for example, males for that matter, your entire analysis, which you're trying to understand how many females can enroll into a particular or what is the interest levels, it will completely fail because your underlying data is not showing that, right? So, for all of these decisions, you need human beings. I mean, you can train the machines for it, but then it is still far from that level where they can have that confidence. That's important, right? So the takeaway from this is that if you want this entire AI space to really flourish, I think AI has to be your friend, but it cannot really take over you. Your decision making skills or your the way you are trying to nudge the model or build that model is going to stay with you. And just staying on this, I take a lot of data science interviews. So I will tell you, when I ask people about their project experiences, just to narrate how what have they learned in that project, to my surprise, people blatantly go out and ask chat gpt, and you can make out from their answers that chat gpt is basically telling them about their project experiences. That's the irony of the situation. So I mean, the overall essence is that, look, humans are still the most important beings here, right? If we talk about this industry only. So the takeaway from this slide is just understand where chat gpt can help you and where it can't, right? Then you have the relevance of humans, taking that question a little bit. As I said, understanding of ambiguity, they will not understand. And do an exercise, after this session you can go and ask chat gpt, what are you good at, and what are you not good at. It will definitely give you a list of things, and it will just tell you that, look, I'm not good with context, and it is just a self admission that it will do. So we fail to basically adjudge that, we fail to just go and understand where it can help us. So context, definitely there is a lot of context based reasoning models and everything people are in the industry are researching for. But I think keeping the marketing gimmick out of it, we are still a little away from when we call that we are doing some reasoning models, because the market is such, the investments are such, we get carried away with the marketing and everything. But if you go into the science of it, I think we are a little away from the context reasoning, and that you can definitely have better models where the it can think to a certain extent. But right now, if you call it a reasoning, I think it is still far from that. Say, for example, the trust and responsibility, the most important part for a business stakeholder, right? If there is a business stakeholder, he's putting in the money, he wants to take a decision. If you're not able to convince that guy after doing a lot of mathematical rigor that, look, how it is going to move the needle, or explain in plain English that, look, this is what we have done, this is statistically or mathematically robust. Based on that, we are saying there is a certain percentage of chance of success. And based on that, he takes that decision. If that kind of a comfort level you're not able to build with the business stakeholders, that is why, Gartner recently kind of came up with a report where they said that by 2030, a certain percentage, or 60 or 70 was it, that all these agentic AI projects are not going to land anywhere. That is why Gartner comes up and says such things, because at a leadership level we understand basic English. We don't understand what the math behind it is. It could do a lot of fancy stuff, but it is not moving the needle for me, or I'm not able to understand, I'm not confident to implement it in the market. I think it's of no use for me. So that is why humans will be extremely, extremely important, right? uh, with that, I just wanted to conclude this entire thing with saying that data alone doesn't write decisions. How you think about data does. So five things. I think this is based on a couple of my readings. I think I just completed last week. There are a few books I will also recommend here. So you understand one thing, if you are have an intuition about something, that really doesn't mean, it is accurate, because there are certain scenarios you have to really have strike that balance with the historical data analysis that you have done, plus the intuition that you have. Every time an intuition will not lead to an accuracy. The second, the most important one is biases or insights. At the bias I told you, if your data has an underlying bias, you're not really going to get the robust outcome. You will still be searching for that answer, but you don't get a, if there is a bias in the data, so those become your insight, because there is certain amount of bias which you have to take care of. Otherwise, it will not lead you to anywhere. Now, right problem again. what are you trying to move? The conversion rate was an example. People go and say that my sales has dropped. Is that the problem, right? Or is that the problem? I mean, in that A/B testing example, if you say my sales has dropped just because of that, it is not about that. There are some changes that you may have done, right, in the website where you changed a creative from creative A to creative B, and that led to your sales being dropped, right? So now your problem statement is not about the dropped sales. Your problem statement is you go and fix the creative, right? So we have to understand that. And data must drive action. At the end of the day, whatever you do with the data, big data, small data, large language models, small language model, if it is not driving action, it is not going to give you anything. It is just money going down the drain. Now, explainability, finally, I think if there are transparent models, I mean, this can be true for simple mathematical models, at least in the decision science parlance. But if you go to a deep learning and all those kind of things, of course, the explainability becomes difficult with that. But then explainability is something where, any investor will put money on the table only when he's able to explain, you are able to explain it in a simplistic manner that, look, what is the outcome he can expect? If not, then I think, it is not going to move anywhere. The project itself, be it agentic AI, be it any model, anything for that matter, everything will fail. So I think these are five things which I gathered. And with that, I will recommend you a few books. And, if you want to build some good understanding, these are non-technical books essentially. And I understand the audience here. I think mostly non-engineers and everybody whosoever is, it is more about choices, it is more about thought processes, how humans think. It is more about, deciphering the, uh, say, for example, the signal from the noise. It is more about understanding what predictive analytics is. You must have read about a lot about predictive analytics, but believe me, you go and read this book by Eric Siegel, you will understand that it is not complex math, but it is pure. The art of it is something else. You have to really understand what is the underlying thing from predictions that people are trying to drive, right? So a very, very non-technical take. That is why I have selected these books. And yeah, whatever you saw here as an outcome, the last slide which I presented was kind of a summary of these two or three books, that I have read in the recent past. Yeah. Uh, so having said all of that, I think I would just conclude and rest my words by saying, the essentially don't rush after decision, the data science, just the mathematical part of it. Develop your understanding on these softer aspects, the qualitative aspects, because the differentiator for an individual is going to be here. It is not about that, because today what Python could do like 2 years back, today if you ask ChatGPT, it will write the entire code for you. But these softer aspects, framing the problems, understanding the human side of it, taking it to a decision, from insights to action. This is what is going to be the criteria for success, and that is essentially what we look for when we look out for candidates, in the market. So yeah, with that, I think I open the floor. If you have, I think 5 or 7 minutes, we can just quickly take a few questions if there are. Yeah.
So participants, may I request all of you to please switch on your cameras. We'll be happy seeing your faces. We'll also get more energy from you.
I think I want to thank Abhijit for a wonderful session, right? So obviously your expertise, I mean, it was clearly evident that, you have been in this industry for quite some time. So to the recipients, basically, see, one thing is for sure, right? So breakaway enterprises are more and more relying on using AI and machine learning to disrupt their business outcome, right? That is definitely is on the rise. And data-driven organizations are much more, I mean, at least all the industry analysts like, Gartner, Forrester and all that have recognized that those enterprises who are data driven are more successful, right, compared to others. And if you, I'm sure all of you want to also be part of such data driven organization and play your role out. So which means that you need to equip yourself a little bit from where you are currently, right? Whether you are doing an MBA or already working in an organization. So I am sure you will be looking out to play your role in this success story. So for that, I mean, if you want to equip yourself, that is where we have introduced this diploma in decision management course as part of from SCSD, right? So if you guys are interested, or any of your acquaintances you feel will be interested in pursuing that course, please feel free to share your words, spread the words. The enrollment is going on. I think Sir can probably give us a little bit more insight on that. So enrollment is going on for the coming academic session. So I will urgently don't miss this opportunity, right? And if I will wait for any question. We have not seen any question here on the chat box yet. Feel free to ask any question, right?
Certain challenges are there, sir, always in the online mode. So we'll have to prompt by name. Vaishnavi, Hitesh, Mangesh, Ishika, Prashanta, Biswas, Sunil. So Priya, if you have any thoughts, any questions, feel free. And please, 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 again, I'm saying you, please switch on your cameras. That's a good motivation and energy when we as a organizers or the speakers of the program. So that's an energy what we get from the videos. So Mrunal, thank you so much. Asha, there is one question from Swapnil. So the question is it that the mathematics is very essential for analysis?
Okay. So, see, again, I will say a fundamental level of mathematics will definitely help you, because see, you are at the end of the day talking about data. But is it the only thing? The answer will be no. Because you see, there are certain roles, to which a good level of understanding, again, I'm sticking to fundamentals, right? It is not about, understanding the calculus in and out. That is not required. Because if you are looking out for a business analyst or an analyst role, you can very well do with, the softer aspects of it, a basic understanding of mathematics, some statistical foundational level understanding, that is good enough. That is at least what I have seen. But if you want to make a career, where you think that tomorrow what the OpenAIs of the world are doing, or the Netflix of the world are doing, the kind of research these guys are doing, it all depends on where you want to take your career, right? If you want to go there to those research level details, I think then it becomes extremely, extremely important, to understand mathematics to that level. You should understand your vector algebra very well. Otherwise, for an analyst, I think if nobody cares if you understand vector algebra well or not.
So if Abhijit ji allows me, what basic understanding I have about this data analytics is that, Swapnil, this is for you, that yes, mathematics helps you understand and apply certain logics to the problem statement, right? So definitely that some basic understanding you should have, but that it doesn't make, as even Abhijit mentioned, it's not compulsory, right? That you be an expert into mathematics, but then yes, there are certain logics whereby mathematics plays an important role, right? So that's not compulsory, I should say, right? Mrunal, you want to say something?
No, sir.
Great, and nice seeing you here. Vaishnavi, Ishika, anything? And special thanks to all those whose cameras are on. So that's an energy for all of us, especially the speakers. So, okay. So we are
Ishika was saying something. Ishika, you wanted to say something?
No, sir.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
Good, Ishika, that you are a part of this program. So, so let's have a group photograph. 1 minute, please. Yes. I'm taking just a print screen. Please smiles on your face. Shubham, welcome. Great. So our faces will be there on LinkedIn. Great. Thank you, Abhijit ji. Thank you for accepting our request for this session. And I'm sure this has given a good insight to all the participants here. Looking forward for more such interactions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Arup, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day, all of you.
Happy weekend to all of you.
Happy
Bye-bye.
weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.